Chapter 7 of In Chancery. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Leanne Howlett. The Forsyte Saga 2, In Chancery, by John Galsworthy. Part 2, Chapter 7. Dartie versus Dartie. The suit, Dartie versus Dartie, for restitution of those conjugal rights concerning which Winifred was at heart so deeply undecided, followed the laws of subtraction towards day of judgment. This was not reached before the courts rose for Christmas, but the case was third on the list when they sat again. Winifred spent the Christmas holidays a thought more fashionably than usual, with the matter locked up in her low-cut bosom. James was particularly liberal to her that Christmas, expressing thereby his sympathy and relief at the approaching dissolution of her marriage with that precious rascal, which his old heart felt but his old lips could not utter. The disappearance of Dartie made the fall in Consols a comparatively small matter, and as to the scandal, the real animus he felt against that fellow, and the increasing lead which property was attaining over reputation in a true Forsyte about to leave this world, served to drug a mind from which all allusions to the matter, except his own, were studiously kept. What worried him as a lawyer and a parent was the fear that Dartie might suddenly turn up and obey the order of the court when made. That would be a pretty howdy-do. The fear preyed on him in fact so much that in presenting Winifred with a large Christmas cheque he said, "It's chiefly for that chap out there, to keep him from coming back." It was, of course, to pitch away good money, but all in the nature of insurance against that bankruptcy which would no longer hang over him if only the divorce went through, and he questioned Winifred rigorously until she could assure him that the money had been sent. Poor woman! It cost her many a pang to send what must find its way into the vanity bag of "that creature." Soames, hearing of it, shook his head. They were not dealing with a Forsyte, reasonably tenacious of his purpose. It was very risky without knowing how the land lay out there. Still, it would look well with the court, and he would see that Dreamer brought it out. "I wonder," he said suddenly, "where that ballet goes after the Argentine," never omitting a chance of reminder, for he knew that Winifred still had a weakness, if not for Dartie, at least for not laundering him in public. Though not good at showing admiration, he admitted that she was behaving extremely well, with all her children at home gaping like young birds for news of their father, Imogen just on the point of coming out, and Val very restive about the whole thing. He felt that Val was the real heart of the matter to Winifred, who certainly loved him beyond her other children. The boy could spoke the wheel of this divorce yet if he set his mind to it. And Soames was very careful to keep the proximity of the preliminary proceedings from his nephew's ears. He did more. He asked him to dine at the Remove, and over Val's cigar introduced the subject which he knew to be nearest to his heart. "I hear," he said, "that you want to play polo up at Oxford." Val became less recumbent in his chair. "Rather!" he said. "Well," continued Soames, "that's a very expensive business. Your grandfather isn't likely to consent to it unless he can make sure that he's not got any other drain on him." And he paused to see whether the boy understood his meaning. Val's thick dark lashes concealed his eyes, but a slight grimace appeared on his wide mouth, and he muttered, "I suppose you mean my dad." "Yes," said Soames, "I'm afraid it depends on whether he continues to be a drag or not," and said no more, letting the boy dream it over. But Val was also dreaming in those days of a silver roan palfrey and a girl riding it. Though Crum was in town, and an introduction to Cynthia Dark to be had for the asking, Val did not ask. Indeed, he shunned Crum, and lived a life strange even to himself, except in so far as accounts with tailor and livery stable were concerned. To his mother, his sisters, his young brother, he seemed to spend his vacation in "seeing fellows," and his evenings sleepily at home. They could not propose anything in daylight that did not meet with the one response: "Sorry, I've got to see a fellow," and he was put to extraordinary shifts to get in and out of the house unobserved in riding clothes, until, being made a member of the Goats' Club, he was able to transport them there, where he could change unregarded and slip off on his hack to Richmond Park. He kept his growing sentiment religiously to himself. Not for a world would he breathe to the fellows, whom he was not seeing, anything so ridiculous from the point of view of their creed and his. But he could not help its destroying his other appetites. It was coming between him and the legitimate pleasures of youth at last on its own, in a way which must, he knew, make him a milksop in the eyes of Crum. All he cared for was to dress in his last created riding togs, and steal away to the Robin Hill gate, where presently the silver roan would come demurely sidling with its slim and dark-haired rider, and in the glades bare of leaves they would go off side by side, not talking very much, riding races sometimes, and sometimes holding hands. More than once of an evening, in a moment of expansion, he had been tempted to tell his mother how this shy, sweet cousin had stolen in upon him and wrecked his life. But bitter experience, that all persons above 35 were spoil-sports, prevented him. After all, he supposed he would have to go through with college, and she would have to "come out" before they could be married, so why complicate things, so long as he could see her? Sisters were teasing and unsympathetic beings; a brother worse, so there was no one to confide in. Ah, and this beastly divorce business! What a misfortune to have a name which other people hadn't! If only he had been called Gordon, or Scott, or Howard, or something fairly common. But Dartie! There wasn't another in the directory. One might as well have been named Morkan, for all the covert it afforded. So matters went on, till one day in the middle of January the silver roan palfrey and its rider were missing at the tryst. Lingering in the cold, he debated whether he should ride on to the house; but Jolly might be there, and the memory of their dark encounter was still fresh within him. One could not be always fighting with her brother. So he returned dismally to town, and spent an evening plunged in gloom. At breakfast next day he noticed that his mother had on an unfamiliar dress and was wearing her hat. The dress was black, with a glimpse of peacock blue, the hat black and large. She looked exceptionally well. But when after breakfast she said to him, "Come in here, Val," and led the way to the drawing-room, he was at once beset by qualms. Winifred carefully shut the door, and passed her handkerchief over her lips. Inhaling the Violette de Parme with which it had been soaked, Val thought, "Has she found out about Holly?" Her voice interrupted. "Are you going to be nice to me, dear boy?" Val grinned doubtfully. "Will you come with me this morning?" "I've got to see," began Val, but something in her face stopped him. "I say," he said, "you don't mean—" "Yes, I have to go to the court this morning." Already, that damned business which he had almost succeeded in forgetting, since nobody ever mentioned it. In self-commiseration he stood picking little bits of skin off his fingers; then, noticing that his mother's lips were all awry, he said impulsively, "All right, Mother, I'll come. The brutes!" What brutes he did not know, but the expression exactly summed up their joint feeling, and restored a measure of equanimity. "I suppose I'd better change into a shooter," he muttered, escaping to his room. He put on the shooter, a high collar, a pearl pin, and his neatest grey spats, to a somewhat blasphemous accompaniment. Looking at himself in the glass, he said, "Well, I'm damned if I'm going to show anything," and went down. He found his grandfather's carriage at the door, and his mother in furs, with the appearance of one going to a Mansion House assembly. They seated themselves side by side in the closed barouche, and all the way to the Courts of Justice Val made but one allusion to the business in hand. "There'll be nothing about those pearls, will there?" The little tufted white tails of Winifred's muff began to shiver. "Oh no," she said, "it'll be quite harmless to day. Your grandmother wanted to come too, but I wouldn't let her. I thought you could take care of me. You look so nice, Val. Just pull your collar up a little bit more at the back. That's right." "If they bully you—" began Val. "Oh, they won't. I shall be very cool. It's the only way."